Welcome to Film Strip and our reviews of the Alien movie franchise.
There is an explanation for this.
Featuring Nick.
Check it out. I am the ultimate badass.
And Jay.
This is so nuts. Listen to what you're saying.
Please note, these episodes will contain spoilers and in-depth discussion of the plots and characters of the films. All content used or discussed in this podcast are the property of their respective owners and used under the Fair Use Act, Section 504c2, Title 17.
Welcome to Film Strip. I'm Jay.
I'm Nick.
This is our review of Alien Romulus, starring Kaylee Spaney, David Johnson, Archie Renault, Isabella Merced, Spike Fern, and Eileen Wu. Directed by Fede Alvarez. Out in theaters now as we're recording this in 2024, Nick. So we're kind of doing live at Nick's place after the show, as it were.
Yep.
The 7th or 9th, if you count AVP and AVPR, like true followers do, like me, in the franchise.
I don't.
Before we get spoiler heavy into the show, you've been following the production of this one since, like 2019 when it was announced, right?
Yeah, I think it was somewhere around there. I think it was right before COVID or maybe the beginning of COVID that they announced this one. And I think that was before the Fox or the Disney acquisition of Fox, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think it was right before that.
Yeah, there was the Neil Blomkamp one, I think, had come and gone, the idea for it, which was going to be kind of a Halloween 2018 idea. Let's ignore the sequels and just pick up with Ripley and Hicks and Newt again.
Yeah, ignore the third one, make it a dream or something like that. So
yeah,
but then they announced this one, and then the director for it. Have you seen any of his other movies?
Yes, I have seen Evil Dead 2013. I have not seen Don't Breathe. I hear it's great. I didn't see his Girl in the Spider's Web, but I liked Evil Dead. I really liked what he did with it. In fact, I thought it was very vicious and visceral and a good update for that series, as it were.
Yeah, I think it was a fine movie. Definitely a very extreme version of Evil Dead,
Oh, yeah.
Not as the tongue wasn't firmly implanted in the cheek as the Sam Raimi ones, but it still did have a little bit of wink and a nod and some humor in it. Mm-hmm. Don't Breathe, though. It's going to be funny as we get into this movie because from what I remember about the movie Don't Breathe is there is a lot of similarities with the plot when it comes to Alien Romulus and this movie. Or with Don't Breathe. So we'll kind of get into it as we talk more about it.
I've heard more than one person say that in like a non-spoiler review or whatever, or write that, hey, if you've seen Don't Breathe, you'll understand what this is all about or what's going on with this. And I almost wanted to check it out ahead of time, but I got to be honest, man, I went as spoiler free into this as I could get. I ignored a lot of the trailers because I understood they were giving a lot of stuff away. I feel like trailers nowadays do that. Maybe there's a reason. But either way, I had only seen the original teaser. And so I knew enough to know it was people who got trapped in a spaceship for some reason and the alien xenomorphs, facehuggers were somehow a part of it. And that was all I knew. And I knew they were doing a CGI Eamon Holm because they had talked about that. But I knew nothing else about it going in.
I knew that, and I had picked up some other stuff along the way, and obviously we'll talk about spoilers now. Is I knew that the plot setup was going to be the original Alien and how they found that alien. I actually had thought that the alien that was going to be in here was going to be the original, but we find out later that that's not the case. Mm-hmm. And then also, really one day before we went to go see it, so basically like yesterday, I got spoiled just kind of scrolling through Reddit and the third act reveal with, I guess you can call it the Alien Resurrection homage or whatever at the end.
Or AVPR homage.
Yeah, that was spoiled for me as well, but everything else was, I wanted the same as you with those on there. So I was kind of going in I would say 50% spoiled. Mm-hmm. I knew basically who was that Rain would be the final girl, which that's pretty standard for these movies.
Yeah.
I was kind of are they going to do a twist like they did in Alien where you think Tom Skerritt's going to be the hero, or who's the guy who played Kane? What's his name?
John Hurt.
Yeah,
where they kill him early on. They did Psycho. And kill him
I thought maybe they're going to do that with her and make it seem she's going to be the new Ripley, and then it turns out to be someone else. But no, they went through with that. But yeah, I'd say I was 50% spoiled.
Yeah, I'd also heard that there were a lot of homages throughout the movie to the entire series because Fede Alvarez decided I'm going to do my own thing, which is an interquel. This has become a new thing where we put a movie in a series, a franchise that's in between two other things. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't have to completely be beholden to the full timeline. It's just got a narrow window to live in. And I knew they would have to have some kind of plot MacGuffin that we'd never hear from these people again and never knew who they were. Mm-hmm. You know, so that and they more or less, when we get into it, like I said, they have a decent explanation for that. But I, like you, I was like, okay, the idea was to go back to what Ridley Scott did in the original Alien, which was, let's do a haunted house movie in space. Mm-hmm. You know, and then, you know, in the midst of that, I mean, they had all seen Halloween and they kind of did that. You know, it's a lot of that, and it works. I mean, I didn't rewatch anything before going into this because every year or so I'll go back and revisit a lot of Alien movies, and I watched them all last year. Mm-hmm. And so they're pretty fresh of brain. I mean, I've seen the first one and the second one, I don't know how many times at this point, so I could practically quote them, I think. And then I've seen the other ones enough to know.
Well, this movie can quote them too.
Yes, it can, and it very well loves to, as we will see. But no, I went in again a little more blind than you did. But expectation wise, all I wanted, Nick, was just a watchable movie. Mm-hmm. Like we talked about and people can go back in the archives and listen. Like the Prometheus review, we both had so much hope for that. And you can hear the desperation in our voices when we're trying to piece together that movie. And I keep rewatching that movie, Nick, and it's the same problem I have with some other movies is I rewatch it wanting it to be something that it's not. Mm-hmm. And it's just never going to be. And then Covenant is it's just dumb. It's just a guilty pleasure at this point. Like it's, you take the best character, in my opinion, out of Prometheus and you just turn it into a lab experiment. That kind of sucks. But as far as action goes, it's fun. It's dumb, but it's kind of fun. The same way like Alien versus Predator takes itself too seriously for me to like really give it a good shot. But at least AVPR knows what it is. It's stupid, but it knows what it is.
Yeah, I think AVPR is pretty offensive.
It's pretty bad. Yeah,
it is. The first AVP is like, it's like a video game movie. Yeah. It's got the same sensibilities as that. And that's really, I think, what it is, even though like AVP I know was a comic book and then there's some like, you know, junior novels and things like that. Yeah. But mostly that series is known for being those video games kind of in the late 90s, 2000s. Mm-hmm. And a lot of them were actually really good. And that's what that movie felt like. It felt like more of an homage to the video games. Didn't work.
No.
Like most video game adaptations, you know, sand maybe like 2 or 3 of them. But yeah, it's a movie I haven't seen in a while. I may go back and revisit it just because I think it is very pulpy and just, you know, inoffensive, where AVPR, in my opinion, is very offensive. We won't get back into that. But yeah. Let's be honest. I mean, this series I always say growing up, like Alien was kind of my Star Wars. Mm-hmm. And man, those series have a lot in common.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, you got, you know, the original trilogy where the first 2 are very beloved and the third one is not really how people, you know, didn't really care for it, but, you know, maybe in light of the sequels now isn't so bad. And then you got the prequels that came out, which are kind of like spit a little bit on the legacy and some of the, you know, the mythos. And, you know, now you got kind of like the Rogue One, I guess, you know.
Something.
I mean, it really kind of is. Like when you think about it, it's a movie that's split in between, you know, the series, and it's trying to tell a story in between that, you know, you really didn't need to be told when it looks at like the whole like mythology and the, you know, through line plot of the original series. But, you know, it's got some information in there and some new stuff we haven't seen before. So,
well, the one thing that they're doing with this is what Rogue One and Solo did in the Star Wars series for a minute. Let's tell stories with things that people will feel familiar with, but they land in between our main story. So again, we're not beholden to try to keep up with this huge legacy. We just have to kind of fit in an area. But unlike those 2 movies, we don't have to bookend at the end of something that directly connects to something else. Because I'll say it right now, like none of the people in this movie, you need to like bother to know who their names are, because they don't really say each other's names that much anyway, except Rains and Andy. And you never hear from them again. And I was talking about it on the drive over from the theater here, that there's nowhere to pick up from these people. I don't care what they do on Yavin 3 or wherever the hell they're going. You know, like it doesn't matter. And that's the whole point of it, is that there's no way to really pick up from this point. But that's a smart thing too, because it allows you just to make a movie. You know, and if your goal is, I just want to make a movie, and Evil Dead 2013 is a little bit like that too. It pays homage to Evil Dead 1, 2, and Army of Darkness, but it also builds its own thing, but it doesn't leave you anywhere to pick up either, because when they did Evil Dead Rises, they didn't feel like they needed to pick from there, and that's fine. I don't think that's a bad thing necessarily. It gives you a lot of freedom as a director to do that kind of stuff. And I'll say this now as we get into the thing and before we do the plot summary and all that. This movie looks incredible. And they spent $80 million on it. They obviously didn't spend it on a lot of the cast because these are not unknowns, but these aren't people that are huge stars yet. So you can get them at a relative rate. A couple of them, nobody in America really will know.
Yeah, they're like the TJ Maxx.
Yeah, exactly.
Actors,
Well, they're
discounts.
They're BBC and stage stars, and they've been on some TV shows and some movies. So, but they've not been leads necessarily yet. Hopefully you meant somebody cool. If you don't, whatever. But if
they weren't in this, they'd be extras in House of the Dragon.
Exactly, yes. In fact, I looked through their filmographies going, somebody had to have been on one of the Game of Thrones. Nope, not at all, basically. But they look like those people, too. And, of course, because a lot of them are British or and European, they sound like them. So they're going to be a lot of that.
We're just showing our xenophobia right now.
I mean, really, we are. But that's okay. I mean, I'm fine with that because I didn't need big stars in this. Like, I was fine with that.
Well, even the original Alien, was really anybody in that movie a big star?
They were
at the
character
time?
actors. No,
Yeah.
they were all characters. John Hurt was the star.
Yeah, Sigourney Weaver wasn't Sigourney Weaver until, Aliens and Ghostbusters and things like that.
Yeah, well, no, she was playing side parts. She was the girlfriend in Ghostbusters until she did Aliens.
Gorillas in the Mist.
Well, that was after, though. I mean, after she got like the Oscar nom and all that, that's when and look, incredible performer, still working today. I'm happy for her. And I love Sigourney. I think she's great. But really, and everybody else saw in that cast, like, presence in people. And I think if you're going to cast one of these movies, you don't necessarily need big stars. You kind of want people that can melt into just being these people, instead of, and being the archetypes of these things, right?
Well, I mean, let's look at an example. It's like, you cast big stars. We saw a trailer for some Brad Pitt, George Clooney, like, look how cool we are movie. And it's like, you watch that, they aren't a character. It's George Clooney and Brad Pitt.
They're playing the Ocean's 11's people.
Yeah, basically. And it's like same with like Tom Cruise. I get, people say he's like really the last big movie star and things like that. But I see Tom Cruise and I don't see him as Jack Reacher. He's not the right height, but, or, Maverick, in the top 10 movies. Yeah, he's Tom Cruise. So I prefer it when it's not bogged down with someone that you recognize, like Al Pacino shows up, doing his, Scent of the Woman imitation. And it's like, you just know it's Al Pacino. It's not the character where a movie like this, it's like, no, they are who they are because I don't have any other reference point besides maybe a trailer for Dora the Explorer.
Right, exactly. Which one of the people was in, as Wilmer said. Well, I think it's time. Let's do a bit of a plot summary here. This isn't as detailed and clean as some of the other ones because we just saw the movie, so this is literally my brain dump of what I remember from it. But
yeah, like I call this kind of an off the cuff.
Yes, very much. So we'll talk about the opening scene where this Weyland-Yutani ship comes upon the wreckage of the Nostromo, which I did like the fact that after it exploded, it didn't just all disintegrate. It's sort of in its own little orbit, which is kind of cool. Mm-hmm. But they pick up this big piece of it, and you don't know why. They cut it out, but you see this outline in it of the original Xenomorph, the original alien from 1. But then we cut away, and we realize we're 20-some years later, and it's a bunch of young colonists living on this no sun ever at all time mining planet for Weyland-Yutani. And no matter what, they're never going to get out of their contract to get off land, to get to their paradise, a place that they want to go. So Rain Carradine is our main character, and she's trapped in this thing. And the only friend she has, really the only family, is an android, an old decommissioned Weyland-Yutani synthetic named Andy that her father fixed for her to basically be a helpmate, a protector, a friend, a brother. She calls him her brother. And he's not entirely functioning on the highest levels, trying to be fair about it, but he's a good protector. He's got uses, and she constantly has to reboot him. So he's like an old PC or an old phone like I'm recording this on now.
Yeah, and I mean, let's be honest. It's played like he's on the spectrum.
Exactly, right. But that doesn't last forever, as we'll know. So, of course, they decide, hey, they get together with a bunch of friends, and they say, hey, there's this space station that's orbiting the planet here. It's locked into our orbit. It's completely decommissioned, but there's enough cryogenic freeze stuff on it. We grab those 5 tubes. We can go to the planet we want to go to. No, we can't take Andy with us, but he can speak mother. And I love this twist in this, is they've turned the computer mother into like a language. It's MU/TH/IR.
Which is what it was in the original Alien. That's how they spelt it. Yep.
Yeah, I like that. So it's built into this whole AI thing. So they bring Andy along to help them communicate and get all this stuff together. They hijack the station called the Romulus and the Remus. It had 2 sides to it, named after the sons of the God of War, which will slightly play in later. Once aboard, the crew encounters the ultimate predator, the xenomorph, and the creature systematically hunts and kills them. They come across a bunch of genetically engineered facehuggers. We'll find out how they're made throughout the way, because they also realized that the Romulus was a Weyland-Yutani black site that experimented on that original xenomorph. They drew out its DNA and through a lot of different experimentation to try to synthesize its perfectness and the fact that it could heal itself and it had all these defense mechanisms, because they realized humanity is dying. We got to have an upgrade. This is going to speed it up. We can't wait on evolution, blah, 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 right? But of course, as things usually go when you try to trap one of these things, it doesn't go well. It's like a shark in Jaws 3. You can't put it in the cage.
Basically, they wanted to make, Captain America.
Yeah, but with the black goo from Prometheus, because as we'll learn now, that comes back as part of this now. So we're going to work that back in. They had to shoot that xenomorph when they learned that it's, got asked for blood. It, destroyed the ship, which is why it's, the station's, hovering over the planet. And we should mention that the planet they're on has rings going around it that are made of like iron ore and ice. So very dangerous. And the decaying orbit of that space station means it's going to ultimately fall into there. But of course, because the xenomorphs attack, a bunch of the crew get killed. We'll talk about each of them as we go through. But in that process, they blow up something and it speeds up the decaying orbit, because we got to put a time clock on this thing. Like
the original 4 movies always had a time clock at the end.
Exactly. And it's a smart thing. But what they do is they give Andy an upgrade in the middle of this thing. They grab the processor chip or whatever out of the burned up synthetic on the space station, and they put it in with Andy, and it totally upgrades his systems. But it also makes him now completely beholden to Weyland-Yutani. He has got to get the black goo in like these Jurassic Park type canisters. The only thing he doesn't have is the Barbasol can, back to that site so that the company can come get it. All other priorities rescinded, obviously. But as things tend to go, he's also not completely disloyal to Rain. Along the way, he's still protecting her. It's his secondary objective, RoboCop style, as it were. And as the people get killed, and then we will it down to just her and a couple other people and him. There's a pregnant girlfriend on the ship back home. She gets hurt. She gets cocooned by an alien. They don't know why they ain't killed her yet. They inject her with some of the black goo because supposedly it's safe, but as we see in a video montage, it's not. They also hook up the old android, which is like a CGI of Ian Holmes' face and played by a voice actor who does a lot more exposition than I thought he would. We'll get into that. But tells them sort of what everything's going on. He's kind of running Andy's gears the whole time. Rain ends up, trying to escape the thing that she gets a gun that can auto aim and shoot. There's this whole zero gravity situation, which we will definitely talk about. She blows up a lot of aliens. Her and Andy crawl through the alien goo in midair, ultimately to get onto the shuttle and escape while the Romulus goes and starts crushing into the rock rings in orbit. But just when you think it's okay, the pregnant girl Rook starts convulsing in her cryo tube. They open it back up, and she gives birth to this egg thing, which hatches itself, and I can only say this in as much serious tone as I can get, Nick. It's a cross between the end of Alien Resurrection and the Eddie puppet that Judas Priest has used for decades that chases Rain around that shuttle. She ends up getting in a fight with it, uses some of its acid against itself. Ultimately, she's able to throw it down an airlock, and she releases the cargo hold while she's on a rope or something, a chain, and the autopilot engages on their ship. She flies away with the android. He's crushed beneath, supposedly, in all the rock mess, and she puts them both in cryo tubes and promises to fix his programming as credits roll. And that's the through line of the movie. We'll get into all of the stuff as we go, but yeah, just first impressions on that opening setup when we come on that wreckage of the Nostromo. I said I already liked the idea of that it sort of was in its own little orbit of space junk at this point. And they pull that thing away and they kind of open it up, and you see that like, oh, that's where the alien's been hiding out. It just crawled into something.
Well, I took it as like it kind of made itself like a protective cocoon or whatever, you know, kind of like how it can make, cocoons as we've seen in a lot of the movies. So it kind of made it around himself to protect itself from the, the exposure of space and everything. Yeah. So it's an interesting setup. I always, thought about that as a kid growing up as like, Well, the alien's still alive. I mean, it's kicking and screaming, both the alien queen and alien. So they're floating out there somewhere unless they went into, orbit and got, burned up on re-entry to a planet. So definitely an interesting setup, one that I'm totally fine with. I like the idea that they're going along the lines of what is Weyland-Yutani going to do with this? They have an objective for it, and we find out what their, maybe what one of their objectives is in this movie. But I like the setup. I like the whole beginning of it when they're, cutting it open and you kind of see the outline of the alien in there. And the thing is, what we later find out about it, I kind of wish we would have got it in the movie, to tell you the truth, because we'll get into it later. But the setup is fine. The setup is fine. I think that really, what else are they going to do? Are they going to have it, the company goes to LV-426. Well, that would screw up aliens and kind of that whole plot there if they went and did that. Are they going to find the alien on another thing? Are they going to bring back freaking David and all that crap from Covenant and Prometheus? Thank God they did not.
No, but they do bring some things. But they don't bring a lot of Covenant in this. There's a lot of Prometheus in this. But.
Yeah, there's a bit of Prometheus sprinkled in with aliens, and really the first four movies.
Yeah. I mean, if there's any homage to anything, and I did joke that there's a little bit of an homage to Requiem in there, but it's mostly the 4 movies. They've kind of written, as most people do, the AVPs out of this.
Those ones don't count, Jay. I'm not even going to argue with this about
you and other podcast friends still don't claim that, but I will. Anyway, point being, I like the opening. I'm with you. What are you going to do? You've got 57 years between the first 2 movies. That's set. That's canon. We know that. So if we're going to do anything with this, let's do something about in the middle or maybe the first third of that. So we're going to 20 years later. So this is like maybe 2 years or something after that blew up. They had to go. I like the idea that space travel takes a long time in this franchise. I've always appreciated that about Alien, because unlike Star Wars, where you can just zip here and there, or whatever, you go through portals and stuff like that. This one is like, no, we're going to cryo sleep. That's an homage to like 2001 and 2010 and that kind of stuff. And I'm down for that idea. The idea that the company is somehow jiggering with this thing to try to make it into a super medicine or a bioweapon or both at the same time, totally believable, right? I mean, this that's our world today. We live in that world.
Oh yeah, totally. So we get past this, and then we actually get some scenes on a planet, which to me was, we're going to talk about a lot of homages in this movie. It's filled with them. Yeah. References, ripoffs, whatever you want to call it. But to me, this was very much like an homage to Alien 3, believe it or not. Yeah. Because it's all about them working in a mining facility. And I know the other one was like, what? It wasn't a mining facility.
It was a decommissioned one, yeah.
Yeah, but it was like a foundry or something like that that they worked on. But very, very similar to probably what the conditions were in Alien 3 for the workers before the prisoners were sent there to kind of keep after it. But you kind of show the hell that people live in underneath Weyland-Yutani. And Weyland-Yutani is a, big company and, almost like a governing body at this point. And what you find out is that Rain, her parents have died, and it's just her, and she's got some friends, and she's got Andy, who's this old android that her dad, kind of kept up for her, and like I said, he kind of acts like, like I said, he's like on the spectrum or something.
He's her surrogate brother, yeah.
Yep. And it would be that, she goes, and you see the beginning of the movie where she goes to this lady, and she's like, well, I want to go travel to this one world. I've done my time. It's almost like a prison sentence with these people.
Well, it's a contract. It's the idea, if you work for so long, then you get passage to whatever system you want to go to.
Yep.
But and this is more of a modern sensibility, I think, is the way people think, is like you go to work for the man and you're always working for the man. They're always going to raise the stakes on you because there's not enough people to go around. Like we're finding that everybody's dying out.
It's what she falls into. You can see she worked 12,000 hours.
Yeah.
And then they bump it up to 24,000 hours right there. And
keep moving the goalposts.
You need to work another 12,000 hours, another 5 to 6 years to be able to get this luxury that this company will provide for you. Thank you for your service. I mean, it's no different than today. I mean, what was the retirement age like years ago? Like 62, and then it's 64 and 65 and 67. It's kind of the same thing.
I think it's a shot at the idea of like stop lossing military folks. Because let's think about who Rain is. She's a young person. She's able-bodied. These old people are dying out on the planet. They drop a line and, just walking by, like, we lost 12 people. They were all older, a week ago or whatever, because they're literally walking a canary into the mine at some point. Like you see these people sort of working to their death from the company. God forgive me for defending the company here, but from their point of view, they're going, hey man, she's young. Like we can get another 5 years out of her before she's completely destroyed probably. Mm-hmm. Now, would she have lived? We don't know or whatever, but it's a gamble that they would take. And it's the same thing that governments do, that young people fight the war, they'll let them out, right? Like it's a servitude contract. It really is. And I think Fede Alvarez and his group have done a good job of mixing in this modern sensibility that a lot of young people feel about, like, oh God, I'm going to work forever and I'm never going to have anything, right? Because everything costs too much. I have no access to it, yada, yada, right? So it speaks to that ideal without being ham-fisted and beat you over the head with it.
Well, honestly, the way you bring that up too, it's almost like home ownership nowadays. It's
exactly.
Like houses right now are twice as much money as they were 10 years ago. I can tell you that right now from personal experience. And it's like, that's what it is. It's like, oh, keep working and you're going to get what you want. And then suddenly it's like, hey, I'm there. And it's like, wait a minute, now it's double. And
right.
You got to put this in. And, probably the way it would go in 5 or 6 years, the, 24,000 hours that she had to work would probably now be 48,000.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. She was never getting off the planet was the idea. And her friends know that, and they're the ones telling her like, hey, look, we got to give these people names. It's Tyler, Kay, Bjorn, Navarro, Rooks, the android. We'll talk about him in a bit. And Andy is her friend, but like,
I'm never going to remember.
Yeah. You don't need to know
I'm just going to say right now. We got pregnant woman. We got Ripley from Alien 3 with the shaved head.
That's Navarro.
Yep.
That's the pilot.
And then we got the two like guys that got the same English accents. So it was like the Cockney accents.
Tyler and Bourne.
Yep. The same type of stuff from Alien 3. So you got all those callbacks right there.
The pregnant ladies, they're cousins. Okay. And you get the sense that like Tyler and Rain have had a thing in the past. They're friends, they're frenemies, they're exes, whatever. It doesn't matter. Like, and that's the thing is, and I'll give this movie credit for this.
I felt like she friend zoned him or something, and that's kind of what it is.
But either way, like he still cared enough to know, like, hey, she had something he needed. Andy, the Weyland-Yutani android, we got to have that because he speaks mother. But also, I got the sense he actually cared for her.
Yeah. So the setup for the movie is basically this: is that these people, they want to get off this planet.
Well, these young people are done. They're getting away.
Yes, these young people want to get off this planet. It's hellish. You can't even see the sun. That's kind of
0 hours of sun. Yeah.
Yep. And so they discover that there's this space station that's decommissioned from Weyland-Yutani, and they go, hey, we can go up there and take those cryotubes, or I'm saying it wrong, and we can then basically go into these, and then we can go off to the planet that we want.
Right.
We won't have to rely on Weyland-Yutani. We're going to steal from the company that's holding us back.
Right.
And the only way that they can get it is with the help of the android, because the system on there, the Unix system, kind of a little spoiler for Jurassic Park. The android is the only thing that can speak that language, and they need him to be able to go on there and open up doors and access systems and things like that, so they can take those cryotubes, steal them, go inside of them, and then go off to basically Never Never Land.
Right, because they have a ship. This is the thing I'll say. Like, I kind of bumped up against it just watching it, and I wonder if on a rewatch I would care enough to know. The whole thing is like, we're never going to get off this freaking planet, but then they're allowed to just fly away. And my thought was like, okay, well, maybe the company is like, good luck. Like, you're not going to get very far because that ship's not got cryo on it. So what are you going to do?
Well, I think they kind of explained it as that any amount of time, like over, any little bit of over amount of time, you have to be in, that type of stasis.
Yeah, yeah.
You got to be asleep. So it's like, basically it's like, if you live in a town and like, oh, I'm just going to go to the grocery store or something. That's like them going into outer space. It's like not a big deal because where are you going to go?
Exactly. Yeah.
For you to get off of here is going to be suicide because the next, habitable planet or whatever.
Is 9 light years away.
Yes. You would have to have this technology to travel to it, and we withhold that technology from you.
Yeah. Okay. And that was what I ultimately sort of figured out in my own head too. So thank you for explaining it out, because that's exactly what I couldn't find words for, is where are you going to go? And also when they do the whole ice and iron ore rings thing, like, good luck getting past those, if you don't know what you're doing and you don't have the capability. So it's one of those, you're not really in prison, but you kind of are because you got nowhere to go, which is, again, the metaphor you want to look to modern, like, well, we pay you enough that you can live in this job. You just can't live the way you want.
Yeah,
so
and
it's
everybody's
just enough to get by.
And everybody's essentially living in trailers.
And it's very depressing and all that. And I'm with you. They do a very good job in that opening set on the planet of the same setup as Alien 3, like you said, with Fincher's world there, and which a lot of people wrote around that. It wasn't just him. I don't want to give him total credit for it, but a lot of people
Vincent Ward was the main scriptwriter.
Yeah, exactly. Like that. It was the idea of let's have this let's put it on a planet for once that we can actually do stuff with. Even though Aliens was on a planet,
realistic type setting.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Aliens it's a planet that's not completely put together yet. It's being terraformed. This one is done, but that's all it's ever going to be. It's just. And it's being mined to death because why? Because Earth sucks, as we know from Alien Resurrection. So years later, they get. I'm with the setup of this. So like, this is get off the planet, and this movie doesn't waste a lot of time with all the things you need to know or don't need to know about these people. Because you're right, Nick. The only two people's name we need to know are Rain and Andy anyway. I don't even think they say the other names that much. The pregnant lady's name is Kay. I don't think they ever call her that. If they did, I missed it. And our theater wasn't exactly packed out either. It was like me and your family and my wife. That was the two people behind us. That was it. So,
it was very empty showing. Which is disappointing.
Well, it is. But again, this movie's tracking to do pretty good this weekend. So I hope it does well.
I will say this is that I've had and this is my little off subject tangent for the podcast. Is I've had such bad experiences in movie theaters over the past couple of years.
Yeah,
which is people talking, being annoying, screw you type of people.
Yeah.
That it was actually, even though it's kind of sucked that there wasn't many people in the movie theater, it was kind of nice just to be able to have the own environment where it was not anybody ruined there. So,
shout out to Our Town Cinemas, Davidson, North Carolina. Very good place. If you're ever in town, highly recommend. And hope they can stay going because it's the only theater I'll bother to go to. I'll tell you that.
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah, it's a good environment. But either way, they don't waste a lot of time to get them off the planet. It's 20 minutes. We're up, boom, we're in. And I love the tech in the movie because it is very much of the world of Ridley Scott's Alien.
It's analog.
It's totally analog. And I you can say like, oh, that's a ripoff or an homage. I actually kind of like it that we're keeping it in that same vein.
That was one of the big things I hated about Prometheus, besides the script,
it's like we went backward in time.
Yeah, right? It was like all suddenly it's like, I get it. You can sit there and say, oh, it's the futuristic ship and everything, but the technology was was so much more advanced than what it was in the future. Mm-hmm. And there really wasn't an explanation for it. I guess you could always sit there and have some headcanon where it goes, well, this technology that was in there was because, they were space truckers and they got the shitty technology or
that's what Shusett and O'Bannon kind of implied in their script and talked about. And Scott read that as what he called the used future.
Yeah.
And I like that idea.
I like it too. That's why, like you watch the original Star Wars, very used, gross, rust and everything everywhere. It feels very real. And like I said, Prometheus, everything was all shiny and flashy and everything like that. But Aliens, Alien 3, even like Alien Resurrection to a point was very like rusted analog type technology, which still when you even think about it is not even that really far-fetched because you go to like any like nuclear facility or anything like that, it's all analog.
Yeah, exactly.
Because they will not connect it to, the systems here in the grids because someone could hack in. So it's like analog technology is, very much self-contained and very, more secure from a security standpoint. So that's kind of my headcanon is like, it's in the future, but we've kind of took a step back because we want to be more secure. Give me it.
I mean, modern power plants do have a lot of modern tech and there's a lot of cybersecurity, technology built into them and stuff, but they're not as advanced as you would think they are because of that same reason, the security risk. You're right. And I like this idea of this too, that this company, you got to think of Weyland-Yutani as if like Walmart had taken over every company in the world, or maybe Apple's probably a better example, or Amazon or something, but they had taken over everything, right? And so there is no threat because they are their own threat. Right. So they can keep things running it. And what do you know about anything that is far and wide? We're going to run it at the cheapest way possible, right? Because we're trying to keep the bottom line above. And if we were to believe the Weyland-Yutani android in this that does a good bit of exposition, because Rook, the Ian Holm recreation, gets more lines than anybody in the movie, is that they're not entirely like the evil corporation trying to create the bioweapon of the future. It's more of we are dying. People are not going to make it. We weren't built for space exploration. We just don't do well with it. So how do we evolve? And they they don't know. They don't have answers. And they come across this being, this creature out there, which, if you're to believe the canon, as it were, they've known about for a long time, and they've been going after for a very long time. And they're like, how can we utilize its perfect biology to improve our own, is the idea. And, and that's the whole story of, why Prometheus was punished from the gods, is he gave people the technology that made them evolve fire, right? And so we're just continually going after that. But the thing about this movie, again, is it just sets us up. We get right on that space station, and I'm sitting there going, and I'm going like, okay, we've been 25 minutes in this movie, and nothing's been killed yet. So I'm waiting for that to happen. And Nick, when they hit the gas on that moment, I feel like there are chunks of this movie that are on a cutting room floor with a lot of character stuff that Fede Alvarez and his editors decided, we don't need it. We need to get to violence very quickly, because once they're on that space station, and when they get into the place where, okay, there's a lab that's got cryo gas in it, because the cryo tubes, we find out, don't have enough cryo liquid to last as long as they need to get to wherever they're going. So they can go rip it off from here and gas them up, and then we're good to go. When they get in there, they see we see them too. There's all these sort of artificial little sacks on the wall. There's the face hugger, as we know it, right? Mm-hmm. And they realize, hey, we can't, the door malfunctions, we can't get out because we're not the science officer. So Rain and Navarro, the pilot, get on the space station and go, if we put the science officer's chip in Andy, he can override the door. And I'm like, okay, I like that we've taken the magical key MacGuffin that's in every video game you've ever played from the 90s and the 2000s, and we've made it like a character, like a plot thing. And David Johnson, I want to say right now, has the best arc of anybody in the movie, because he actually has an arc. He plays two different characters. He plays kind of the simple protector of Rain, and then he plays the super android who is part company man, but also is kind of conflicted about what his original programming was. I liked him. I thought he was great.
Yeah, and to recap, so they're on the ship.
Yeah.
And the two brothers end up kind of, with Andy, end up stumbling into this locked up room that Andy's able to get into, but once shit kind of goes down in there, which is the face huggers start breaking out, Andy's not allowed to exit. Mm-hmm. So Rain and Navarro end up coming in to try to save him, and Rain goes, well, there's an android here who's obviously got access to the doors, and I'm going to take out essentially the key card out of him and then give it over to Andy. And then, they put it into Andy, but the problem is that when Andy gets into that, he has a complete reboot, and now he's essentially a company man.
Yeah.
He went from being, her brother and, whatever, to now I'm going to be the stoic, company man that's going to do what's best for Weyland Yutani. And he's able to get out, but Navarro, in the meantime, though, ends up getting face hugged and getting impregnated with the xenomorph. And that's when we get, Ian Holm to appear, in the movie, where, he turns out he was the android that she ended up taking that key card from.
Yeah.
He was somewhat destroyed or whatever when the big chap, that's kind of the internet name for the original alien, came back alive and kind of tormented the crew, which is something that I kind of, I talked about, like, it's kind of the movie I would have wanted to see.
What happens when they capture it and start doing experiments on it?
Because what and tell me if this is what you took, is that basically they cut him out of the cocoon that he made for himself, and he came back alive.
Yeah.
And he ripped that, that the ship, the space shuttle to shreds, like killed people, cocooned them, did all this stuff. And at the end, they ended up killing him. But I guess that was the one thing I just didn't get, is like, he died and you see, like, the rest of his body kind of hanging up. Who was the person that killed him? Like, who? There was no final one. I guess I didn't catch that.
They drop the line in it. So what happens is it's in like this bit of stasis when they get it out of that cocoon that it's put itself in. And remind me to come back to this, because they do evolve the alien biology, or maybe it's stasis. We see something we've never seen before in this. At least I've never remember seeing it. But anyway, they bring it out, but it's not completely going because it's got the harpoon through it. It's been half dead. It hadn't been eating anything. It's been out in space. It's cold. So they're kind of drawing its blood. They're pulling experiments on it, trying to figure out what it is. And in the process of doing that, of course, they have to nurture it a little bit. So they feed it something, and it wakes up. And then it blows through the crew, and the crew has armament there in case, shit goes down. So they shoot it to pieces. And while they're basically got it hung up there after it's killed a bunch of them, but as Rook, the Ian Holm android, says, its final revenge is that it's acid for blood. And so the blood leaks through blows all over to the science officer, cuts him in half. It goes through the hull to a point that it damages the station, and it kills everybody there. So they put something else into this. Oxygen levels have to be turned back on, because the oxygen's turned off. So it shut itself down basically in defense, and the gravity is off in the station too. So every few minutes it'll cycle itself and gravity will return, but then it'll go down. Yeah. We see that when they're crawling onto the ship and there's this rat hanging in the middle, which is a setup. And the way I took it, the way I understand it, is that they shot it and killed it, but in its final revenge is that it's got acid for blood. But that alien is dead, and I'm with you though. I had thought, because I think you had told me they discover the first alien from the first movie, and I'm like, okay, that's a spoiler, but not a bad one. I kind of wonder how we get to here. That makes sense. I'm with you. I kind of wanted to see the movie where that thing woke up and then took out another crew in the middle of it. The mining teens wanting to get away from their shitty jobs. I'm like, well, I guess that was the movie they landed on, but I'm more interested in what happened on the Romulus and Remus.
And now thinking about it a little bit more, because again, we just saw this movie a little bit ago, so a lot of things are kind of fresh, but they're kind of coming back. But also the people were cocooned that we find out later, and they gave birth to aliens. So I guess that's what happened.
Exactly.
The whole crew there was, there was multiple aliens there, and they took out the crew, cocooned them, and basically that's what it was. All the crew was cocooned, facehuggers, impregnated, and then they died that way.
Well, and we do know now the facehugger, the parasito or whatever they call it, was created by Weyland-Yutani. It was we have to have a delivery mechanism for this thing, and it is a creation. As we know, the xenomorph itself is a creation of science experiments from the big, muscle-bound Triple H aliens from Prometheus on down, and David and Walter. They have engineered this thing, and they had to have some delivery mechanism for it. And the first one to get it is Navarro. I got to say, when they're getting out of the cryospace or whatever, the facehugger work and stuff, a lot of that's very practical. You can tell it's practical effects. It looked really good. Going through the water and jumping on the dudes and, they're cattle prodding it and all that shit. I enjoyed that work. I thought it was good. And when it wraps around Navarro, of course, they, like everybody else, have no idea what this is. How does this work? And they know if we take it off, it'll kill her. So what are we going to do? Well, they decide, hey, let's take a little bit of that cryo stuff and freeze the tail of it, and then we can pull it off of her. But it's already done its job. But am I not wrong? This is the first time we've seen one where they take it off and like tubes coming out of the mouth, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine that's what it would have looked like with anybody else, that they would have focused the camera there.
Yeah.
They were obviously going for, let's be honest, sexual imagery in this movie, because that's, that's what it is.
Let's been from the beginning. I mean, Shusett has told forever that the craziest thing he could think of was the face rape of a man. That would be just the scariest thing. And in the 1970s, that would have blown an audience's mind, and it did. Mm-hmm. And the other way to kill it is that we know, and they set up this thing too, where there's this little piece of technology that you hold it behind yourself and you can see like this x-ray through yourself or whatever.
Yeah.
And it was in one of the trailers. I had seen it before where I knew Navarro was going to have a chest burster. You knew everybody in this movie was going to die, probably. So
yeah, they had to do something.
Yeah. And so she holds it behind her back and you see the thing coming out and it's like, oh God, we're going to see this. So, and that's the alien that kind of becomes the ringleader of a lot of this stuff. So we'll call it Navarro X, I guess, because it's the Navarro xenomorph in this. And of course that sets everything into motion, because when she's getting chest bursted, she hits the gas or something on the ship and it starts going sideways. They hit a fuel tank and we have to get the time clock to increase, because it's 36 hours before it's going to crash. Now it's 45 minutes. So we have to speed that up. And I like that, because again, they're giving that to the updated Andy character to try to tell, like, hey, we can't do this. This is how to do this, how to work through this. But we don't know what his primary motivations are until Rain straight up asks him. And it's a good moment, because that's one thing that nobody's ever bothered to ask the androids, when the androids have been like part of the problem in these movies before, is like, what is your directive? Mm-hmm. They just assumed that it was, that the Ian Holm Ash character was there as the science officer. They didn't know he was a synthetic. And then in Aliens, by the time Bishop is there, we've just had synthetics on forever, right? It's just part of it.
Yep.
So this is the in-between of that. But I don't know. I liked all of that. I liked the Navarro kill. I thought it was well done. It looked like every other chest burster thing, but it was pretty gruesome. And that's the thing. Fede Alvarez is not afraid of like the blood and the goo, man. There's a lot of goo in this movie.
Yeah. Obviously, one thing that's been kind of consistent in the Alien movies, well, I'm not going to say in the first 4 movies, but I would say in Alien Covenant and then the AVP movies, which I don't really consider it, is the chest burster and the face hugger. They're really trying to speed up the whole process. Because you remember that first Alien movie, like he had that face hugger on him for a while. Yeah. And then he was awake for a while and that thing grew from him. This happens in a matter of like 10 minutes.
Yeah, it's pretty quick. It's very AVP in that way. It's very
so it was
quick.
like, goes on the face and then 10 minutes later it's bursting out. But the thing that we've never seen before, at least that I've never seen before, was they show how fast the alien grows and that basically after it's a chest burster and it goes out, it sheds its skin and then it kind of makes a cocoon for itself.
Yeah, to get to its adult phase.
And then it can get to its adult size much quicker. And it's kind of an interesting scene because he sees this cocoon, which...
Yeah, the Bjorn guy comes in and sees this. Yeah.
Which, looks like genitals and which, again, it fits very much within the alien universe.
Very Giger, yeah.
Yep, and he grabs like an electric prod and then he puts it in there and kind of fries what's ever inside of there. But then he ends up getting the tail going through him and killed him. And then the alien, which is kind of like the main alien throughout there, has kind of like a scarred face throughout the whole movie. So you kind of they do it so you can identify it.
Exactly. Well, and that's also an homage to AVP when the thing gets the half little, the laser net from the
I was thinking
Predator
Jaws 2.
Well, also it's very Jaws 2, which I think Paul W.S. Anderson would tell you he ripped that off from Jaws 2. So he wanted it to have a thing. It's Scar, it's, Lion King, whatever. But I like the idea that he thinks he kills it. And then its ultimate defense is that blood, right? So it starts dripping on him. We've never seen anybody completely killed by acid blood before. We've seen him damaged by it. Yeah. That's how he dies. Like, it just cuts through him. And it's pretty vicious. And the Bjorn character is an asshole from the beginning. Like, he's just a total asshole.
He's a real dick to Andy.
Yeah, and they explain it's because his mom died in a mine because the android decided I can save 9 and lose 3. The good of the many outweigh the good of the few, whatever. And
he basically, like, there was gas or something in a mine and the android locked him out or something because that's what would save 9 by doing it. And they kind of play that up throughout the movie too with Andy's character.
Yeah, because he hates androids and all this stuff. So but he goes down. It's pretty awful. Kay is knocked out in this process, the pregnant lady. And the alien is going around. And when we see that Navarro X alien, I'm going to call it, I just keep calling it that because it's the scarred alien. It's the one that we really follow the rest of the movie. The rest of them are just kind of there in the background. They're the drones, right? And I think what you said in there is that all the crew had been cocooned up. And after those creative facehuggers got out, because they didn't know what they had, they didn't know what they made. And then it created a whole army of them, which is probably maybe a dozen, or so, but it's still a lot in a small space like that. It's enough to do the damage. And they've not got to deal with all this. And the thing is, it really whittles it down to we've got Rain, Tyler, and Andy left. And Kay's on the ship, kind of knocked out. So we're going to leave her over there, which like we're coming back to her. Obviously, she's pregnant. We know that's coming down. But before that, she gets to a point where she feels like she can get to a door, and Andy will not unlock the door because he sees the alien behind her, and he knows, like, no, that's exactly what it's waiting on us to do. Like, he knows enough to know that. So I'm going, okay, I guess whatever programming was in the fake Ash or Rook or whatever, it knows enough about the xenomorphs to know how it hunts and how it works. So he observed it for a good bit before it wiped out his crew.
Yeah, and it's, good observation by Andy and stuff, seeing that. And I like that scene because it's got some tension and everything, but you also understand why he's not opening up the door because the alien, like they show, it's like kind of just sitting there like a dog, just waiting, like, okay, open up the door. And then it realizes, okay, he's not opening up the door, and then goes and grabs, the K, it pulls her away, and, it doesn't kill her. You just see that she gets pulled away. Yeah. And then basically at that time, Rain then kind of gets frustrated with Andy about him, that's when she asks about his directives, and that his number one directive is what's best for the company. Yes. Very much a company man, right?
Exactly,
doing what's best for the company.
We see something with that alien, too, with the tail. We've always seen him stab people with it, and stuff like that. And it'll do that later to Tyler in this movie. But it can just hook you and hold you, too. It's like, okay, we haven't seen it use the tail like that before, which is interesting. And so the idea that it doesn't kill her immediately is I'm curious as to why you think that is, because when they find her later cocooned, they go like, well, obviously she hasn't been impregnated with anything yet because there's no dead parasite laying by. So was it just like storing her for later for food or what?
My take was that it was going to be cocooned and face hugged, but it just hadn't got there yet. Kind of like Newt, it's kind of a callback to Aliens where Newt was cocooned and Ripley went to go save her, and
had to wait for an egg.
But it never happened. The egg did, wasn't, or the face hugger wasn't able to get to her in time.
Right. So we'll come back to the eggs in a little bit though. But so we're on a time clock again. We're starting to fall down. We know this is going to go down. And so they realize, okay, we've got to get over to the Romulus side of the ship. They're on the Remus side of the ship. We've got to get on the Romulus side to be able to save her. We're going to save her. We can get there. But to do this, we've got to go through all these different places. And this is where I feel like they're playing a lot of the alien isolation game a little bit, where you have to creep around and do stuff. They raise the temperature in the room so it equals your body temperature, which, by the way, that wouldn't actually work. So you would just get hotter. So, but anyway, they try to explain that, like, if you sweat or get any chill bumps at all or get freaked out, it's going to come for you because these things hunt on, feel and temperature. Very predator, by the way. And
yeah, also, if you're like walking and it's supposed to be like tiptoeing around, don't answer a goddamn cell phone.
Exactly right. Yeah, that's the other problem too. Yeah, don't do that. So yeah, they're again, if you try to think too much about what this movie tells you, you'll drive yourself nuts because it doesn't want you to pay attention to that. It doesn't matter. The idea is we want to get these two people. We get Rain and Tyler walking through this area where there's all these face huggers just waiting to jump on them.
I just couldn't believe that they actually ripped off Tremors 2 with that.
It very much is a Tremors 2 callback. Yeah, good pull.
Yeah, it's like, it can sense heat, so we gotta like make ourselves like not be sensed or whatever, by that. Which, I guess that was always the thing, is like these things don't have eyes. How can it see? How can it sense you? And they kind of try to answer it here by it hunts by sound and by heat signature.
Mm-hmm. But again, very predator.
But yeah, very, very predator. But that's the part that bugged me about this scene was they're tiptoeing around. It's like, we can't be heard. We can't be heard.
Yeah.
And then, that's when, Kay, this is before the scene that we just talked about. She buzzes in and like, oh, I need help. And dude's like talking to her. And it's like, dude, you just told you can't talk. You got to be silent. And you're sitting there talking to her.
We also see this like video of the science officer from earlier, and we see like his blown out the back of his head and his lower torso is missing. So he's obviously been eaten by one of the xenomorphs. That's what it looks like when you're done. They had to show the gore because Fede Alvarez is not afraid to show the spaghetti, Nick. Like you're going to get a lot of that in this movie. And so they have to cup her face, and she has to do the Jessica Biel and the Texas Chainsaw remake where she's, I'm going to put my hand over my mouth. That's how you know I'm scared right now.
Yeah.
And so I'm okay with it because it ultimately winds in a good scene, which was in the trailer when Andy says run, and now you know why. Because, stuff starts going down and...
all the facehuggers coming out.
Yeah, they're coming out.
And I'll say this, too, is like that's one thing I really enjoyed about this movie was the facehuggers were more of a threat.
Oh, yeah.
Because you watch the first one, I mean, facehugger was just beginning of the movie, and that was it. Mm-hmm. Aliens did have the scene kind of towards the, the second act where, Ripley and Newt were being hunted by, which is a great scene. Very much, I feel like Jurassic Park kind of copied that, later.
A little bit, yep.
Yep. But yeah, they definitely made them more of a threat here. They're more of like a swarm. I mean, they were just kind of jumping at you and everything like that. So definitely I enjoyed that the facehuggers were more of a character in this movie than they have been in any other one. I
felt like it was a callback to arachnophobia when all the spiders start coming after everybody and Jeff Daniels in the barn.
I was thinking like the birds,
Yeah, I think that's what that's ripping too. Yeah, so very much all that. Not Birdemic, just to be clear. The birds you were talking about.
Yes. But, the Alfred Hitchcock one, yes.
Yes. But same idea. No, it's a good bit of tension. It's a good scene. It's fun. We get through there. And then they get on, the ultimate thing is they get on the other side of this and they realize, like, okay, the only way we're getting off this ship is we have to take the black goo back to the ship because that's when he's going to unlock the airlock.
Magical black goo.
So I audibly laughed in
the theater. I heard you.
Yeah. I said to myself.
This was an expedition dump to end all expedition dumps.
Yeah, oh, dude.
It was.
Yeah.
I appreciate, Alfred and like the Nolan Batman movies, like, explaining what the modus operandi is for the Joker. I mean, it's like, yeah, okay, we need this in some movies.
Because that's well done. That's one scene. It's 2 minutes.
This was like, wow. Like,
okay.
This was Bond villain levelness where it's like,
yeah,
I'm going to tell you my entire, plot and theme and everything. I mean, they just go down deep, and I'm just sitting there thinking, I'm like, man, if I'm running for my life, I don't really give a shit. You know what I mean? I just want to get off of here. I don't care if these things are a science experiment. I don't care if these things are something that came from a fucking cereal box. I don't care. You know?
To quote Jurassic Park again, the other problem is that they're using this CGI Ian Holm situation, which is very Princess Leia from Rogue One.
Oh, dude, it was distracting.
Is it not? It looked like the faces on the dogs in one of the Nightmare on Elm Street movies. I think this is the second one that has those, and maybe even the first one has those. And then it had that Rogue One Princess Leia thing, but they gave the character all of the lines that basically did you didn't stop to think if you should while you were trying to think if you could. Is the whole thing. And I'm
really quoting Jurassic Park a lot right now.
Well,
hint.
Yeah, but the point is, the movie should have asked itself that. It's like, do we need a character that explains this much to everyone? And somewhere along the way, they decided the answer to that was yes. And they gave it to not any of the people we know. They gave it to a voice actor doing Ian Holm with Ian Holm's, and Ian Holm has long been passed, so good to his estate. I hope they got paid well for this. But his likeness,
that upper lip, man,
it was wrong.
That was
terrible.
Justice League.
It was terrible.
Removing Henry Cavill's mustache. Yes,
and giving him the Joker face.
Yes, and I'm just sitting there thinking, I'm like, I get it. You're doing the callback to Alien, but you could have easily just brought back Lance Henriksen. I know he's old.
Thank you.
You know what? But that dude would probably work for a 6-pack of Diet Coke at this point. You know
well,
what I mean?
The other thing is, can we not afford Michael Fassbender? He's not exactly like such a megastar. You can't get him.
I think that they were not going to bring him back because then they would be like, oh, is this really the direct sequel to Covenant? You know, you saw those face huggers like in those container things. They weren't in eggs. They were kind of in containers.
Yeah.
Which at the end of Covenant, that's what he had. He had
created that.
So it was like, is that what it is? But then it doesn't line up with them bringing in the original Alien. So they could have easily made this kind of a sequel to Covenant when you really think about that.
It's supposed to be a sequel to Alien.
But
the idea,
with it being a sequel to Alien, I would have preferred if it would have just been Bishop. Because
right? That was the next evolution in Android.
It was, and I get it that this is closer to Alien than it is Aliens in the timeline, but it's just not good looking. It's distracting.
Well, let me ask you this. Like, is there any harm in finding an actor that looks kind of like Ian Holm that can just pull that off?
Why don't they just bring in, what's his name from the X-Men movies and Wanted? What's his name?
Oh, you're talking about James McAvoy?
Yeah, I mean,
that would work.
Just play it off. It's like, yeah, well, guess what? He played Bilbo and he played Bilbo. There you go.
I can go for that. I wouldn't have had a problem with. I have no problem with the idea that we need to recast someone because I don't want to get on a tangent about AI and
it's
CGI.
It's just not there.
It's not necessary. The voice actor David Blatt does a great job of copying Ian Holm for the most part. It sounds just like him, but you could pull that off with a lot of. There's a lot of modulation.
Go back to Alien 3. Mm-hmm. When you had Bishop, remember when she pulled Bishop out of the wreckage? Yeah. His face was all destroyed and everything.
That worked.
I mean, they could have done something similar like that where they just did, instead of doing CGI, do practical effects, have like half his head like ripped open or something,
right,
and just show part of his face. Because again, okay, now it's just an homage to Alien 3, which this movie is just filled with homages every which way.
Well, yeah, why not?
Or Member Berries, the South Park reference.
Well, yeah, true. But I'm with you, though. I would have rather it been it would have been a real actor. Someone, I didn't need the CGI thing because it was distracting. It took me out of the movie. And the fact that, again, they gave that character all of the exposition dump to tell us what we get to, which is the thing that we're getting to. We danced around it. Let's talk about it. Is he's taken the black goo from Prometheus and Covenant and synthesized it a little bit now to try to make it into something that will heal, sick and dying animals. And what he doesn't tell them is that they injected it in rats. It mostly worked on it, but as we see later, the rat bursts into another alien later on. If you inject this into a person, it mutates.
Yeah. So basically, the way it is, and they kind of set up in the beginning of the movie with like, oh, my parents died and his parents died and everything.
Yeah.
That this is kind of like a miracle, like I said, like Captain America's super soldier serum, where we can inject people with this and they won't die. They will be impervious to space travel. They will be impervious to hard working conditions.
Right.
And that's what it's, I guess that's their commentary, is that this company, they just want their workforce to be more superior so they can be more profitable in the end.
They're masking into the idea of like, oh, we're dying as a species. This will make us evolve, but it's really just so people don't die when they're mining all these places out. You're right about that. That's a good pull. So I didn't think about it, but that's exactly what they're trying to do, is basically make indestructible workers, because the androids can't do it. They can't make enough of them at that point.
Yeah, and then of course they drop like Peter Whalen, which was Guy Pearce from Prometheus saying, oh, this was his dream or whatever, the immortality and
the
things
poor
like that.
Utanis have been screwed in this series. They get one lady in one scene in one movie that you don't think counts.
That doesn't count. No, it doesn't count.
They are clearly part of this. I want the Utanis to get their comeuppance at some point, or at least like find out how they got screwed out of it, like the Davidson part of Harley Davidson or whatever. To quote Fletch Lives for everybody here, but unlike some of the things, a movie we will not be reviewing probably in the future, but they go through all of this because we have to have a reason for them to be able to get off the ship, and it's in an airlock. It won't unlock. The mother computer will not unlock it, which is basically the Rook is hooked into mother. That's how it's running now, because his processor chip's in Andy, we got to remember. And he won't unlock it unless we take the goo to the Jurassic Park goo, I'm going to call it, to the ship. And once it knows it's on the site, on Jackson's site where we used to live, then it'll let us go, because it knows that, like, okay, you're going to let me autopilot you back down. Cool, I'll let you go. Mm-hmm. And I'm going like, that's bullshit. He's going to pull all the air out of there and kill all of them on the way back, because the only thing that needs to live is the android and that. But whatever. He knows they're all going to die anyway, because he's seen what it does to a crew in a matter of no time. Mm-hmm. Which lines up with Alien. I mean, it wiped out Ripley's crew in less than 24 hours. So once that thing was out, it was over, as it would be, right? And it sets everything going, because we know we've got this time clock going, and they decide, okay, we got to get through this. How do we do it? And Andy's the one that realizes, like, okay, we might have to go through a pretty bad minefield to do this. So can you handle a gun? And Tyler's like, yeah, sure, I know what I'm doing. And they do a proto version of the pulse rifle here, which is a big Aliens homage, and they get the whole teaching how to do it. It has this like auto aim assist, and I do love this like joke in it of like, how did you learn how to do that? Video games and magazines. And I was like, that's kind of a cute thing. And I did ask your son, was that in Isolation? He said, no, it wasn't in there, because there's really not any weapons in that. And you and I sort of were talking about it and surmised it to the point of like, well, these people are scientists, but if they're going to have armament, they would have to have like assisted armament, because Colonial Marines would know how to shoot. This thing has this little deal where you basically point it locks on, and it'll turn your arm in the right direction. And because you have to have a reason for this 5 foot, small woman to be able to shoot this gun. No offense, but Sigourney Weaver's 6 feet tall. She grabs a gun and learns how to shoot it from Michael Biehn. I can buy that, right? He's kind of a buff dude himself. I could believe that. This little thing grabbing this gun, there's no way. And so, and I love though that Andy gives him the whole don't shoot it though, because we're on the lower deck. If the acid blood goes through, we've got immediate, decompression.
Call back to Aliens, because again, when they're in the compressor room with the nest, just like this,
and Alien Resurrection.
You can't shoot, because it will cause basically us to die.
Exactly, yeah. But I like that though, because he said maybe just pointing it at it, it'll interpret it as a threat long enough for you to get by or get around, whatever it needs to do. And I'm like, okay, I'm down for this, but I'm like, there's no way she's not shooting this gun. Like, they don't hand this woman this gun not to shoot it at some point. And I knew there was a zero gravity MacGuffin in this movie that we hadn't come back to yet. Chekhov's zero gravity.
There's a lot of Chekhov stuff.
We're going to come back to Chekhov's
we got Chekhov's gravity.
Yeah, but Chekhov's gravity is the first Chekhov we're coming to. So Chekhov's gravity is going to come in because her and Andy get cornered, and there's all these xenomorphs coming at them. And she decides, hey, turn off the gravity, and then we're on an even playing field, at that point. And my question to you, Nick, is, okay, we turn off the gravity so she can shoot all the aliens while they're kind of suspended in the air and still coming at her, but still suspended in the air. How are the bullets defeating zero gravity?
I don't know.
I mean, okay, that's a problem for me, all right? Like, if you're going to have physics in the movie, I'm not trying to be pedantic, but if you're going to have physics in a movie, play by the rules. Like, that should be matrix bullets. They shouldn't be working.
I mean, I
fast.
guess the propulsion of it, I mean, you think about like a spaceship can fly because it's being propelled with engines, and it can go through zero gravity with that. So I guess
okay,
it's the same thing. It's shooting up. I mean, I don't know, dude.
Okay, well, you've just gone to a larger point that they are in outer space and everyone just agrees on which direction is down. So that's already a problem. But I don't want to nitpick it to death because what results in it is a cool ass scene where she blows all that shit up and it's all this alien blood and alien parts hanging in the air that they have to kind of spindle through. It's a cool scene. But if you apply any minute of thought to it, it's like, but wait a minute, would that really work? And I'm sure there's like probably Reddit articles to death about, oh, it wasn't complete zero gravity. And so like you're saying, like the bullet's moving faster than the da-da-da. And I'm sure there's like a Neil deGrasse Tyson formula for it. But just watching it in the theater, I'm going, wouldn't the bullet float too? I don't know.
I don't know.
It does look cool though. You agree with that?
No, it's a fun scene. It's
like a game. It's like a video game.
Well, you know what it kind of reminded me of? Did you ever have an NES growing up?
Yes.
Remember the Ninja Turtles game?
Oh, God.
Remember the underwater level?
Yeah, oh, God.
I'm bringing back some memories right now.
I tried to forget it, yeah.
Yes, with all like the pink coral and you got that. And
well, that's also been ripped off in the Jaws the Revenge game, but go ahead.
Yes, that's what it kind of reminded me of because it's like you're swimming around and you don't want to touch this because you'll die, and it just brought back memories of that Ninja Turtles game. Ninja Turtles 2 was such a better game. But yes, I hated that underwater level, and that's what it kind of felt like.
The underwater levels in the Super Mario Brothers sucked too, just for the record.
Yeah, underwater levels just are terrible altogether.
Anti-underwater levels on Film Strip Podcast, clearly. But I like the idea though that they keep the blood away because they ultimately know when they turn it all back on, of course, all that's going to drop and cause problems. But they get back to their name of their ship's the Corbellion, and they get back there just before the station crashes into the rings, which I gotta say is a really cool looking effect. Like,
it was.
That's
definitely
incredible looking work.
Yes. And I'm not an astronomer. I don't know really much about space, but the one thing I've always thought was like the rings on planets, like the actual asteroids that make up the rings
the rocks.
are not that close together, but on this one, like they're, basically within inches of each other. And, it's like a avalanche of rocks and ice and everything. But it's definitely a cool scene, because at this time Tyler's dead, the pregnant woman, they ended up saving her, and then
Tyler's been he got killed real good. Like he got the tail through the back, and we get the second Jaws through his head. Yeah.
Yep, and and before they as the spaceship is kind of getting destroyed and everything, you have the scene where they're climbing up the elevator shaft.
Yep,
and it goes 0 gravity, 2 gravity, and it's a very weird scene because rain falls.
Yeah.
And then the alien saves her, and he saves her because obviously there's a face hugger there and it wants it to be, the next, face hug person or whatever. And then this is probably the most groan-inducing scene of the movie where Andy then jumps down the elevator at the alien, shooting at it. Kind of like, remember the first Jason Bourne movie when he jumps off of there and shoots the guy? It's the exact same scene. And then he's got to say the catchphrase. And this whole movie now has been littered with it, where you have, Ian Holmes, CGI character going, you have my sympathies.
Yeah.
That was a line that he said in the first Alien. And then Andy here says, get away from her. And then he shoots up the alien and he goes, you bitch. And
but with no emphasis at all. It's like, you bitch.
Yeah.
It's very like, because the two sides of Andy, like the company side is very serious, very dour, kind of Walter-ish, a little bit of David-ish. But then the Andy side's the very protector side, the friend side. And it's just so, I mean, I groaned. I was like, ugh, did we need that?
It was groaning because this is not a series that does that.
No.
I mean, I forgave Terminator 2 for doing it.
Yeah.
Because it was kind of earned. But then when Terminator 3 starts doing it, where they should be back and stuff, it's just like, is that really what we want these movies to be? Is just these callback lines and everything, and the fact that they just inserted that into there. Again, I'll forgive, you have my sympathies because again, it's a robot. Maybe they got the same type of, dialect and things like that. And, talk about the perfect organism and everything. But that right there was just, I don't even want to say it's a step too far. It's a mile too far.
Do you know what it reminded me of, Nick? In Halloween 2018, there's a great scene. And it's a callback scene, but I liked it, where Michael throws Laurie off of the balcony, and he looks down and she's laying on the ground, and he looks back a couple minutes later and she's gone. Kind of like he was in the first movie. And I'm like, oh, I like that. And then they fuck it up, in my opinion, when he's standing there and then they do the fake light on her face in the closet like he was behind her and she's like, Happy Halloween, MF or whatever, and start stabbing him. And I'm like, it's a step too far. It's like there's a way to do that and it not be like if he had just jumped on the alien and tried to say get away from her and just left it at that, I'd have been like, okay, so you went right up to the line and you didn't cross it. But when he dropped the "you bitch," I was like, no, we didn't need to do that. Like, and that's not the character to do it. Like, because when Ripley does that, and this is a credit to Sigourney Weaver just knowing how to fucking act too. It is from a place of complete and total rage. And if you know the story, and who's listening to this who doesn't know the whole Alien franchise at this point, but you know Ripley, one of the big things she's dealing with in that movie is that she finds out her daughter that was back on Earth is dead, had died years before. So she's grieving, and now she's got this chance to have a family again, and this fucking thing is about to take it from her.
Yeah, it's going to take it from her again.
Yeah, and she's like, hell no, bitch. I'm not letting you do that. Mm-hmm. And it comes from such a great place, and it's such a gravitas line, where here, it just seems like a cheap pop. It's like, oh.
Well, and I think you're kind of hitting at, like, at one point you can sit there and say it's unfair to compare it because you're, comparing an all-time classic, but then again, it's part of the same series, so it's going to be compared. And I look at like the exposition throughout Alien and Aliens, and even Alien 3, it's very organic. And then we had that big, that big exposition scene in this movie, which felt out of place.
Yep.
You have lines right here that feel forced, where in Aliens, I don't even want to say earned, they're just organic with the movie. And again, I get it that this is not the most prestigious cast and everything like that. But again, we talked about this too, is like Alien, like no one knew who anybody was at that time. But there is definitely, outside of the guy playing Andy, I feel that there is a big, big difference in the acting ability of these characters and what we saw, I would say, in pretty much the original quadrilogy, including Resurrection too. I mean, you got Ron Perlman in there and things like that. Like, it's chewing the scenery, but good actors. Here, it does, and it feels very much like that movie Don't Breathe, and I was going to bring this up a little bit earlier, but the plot of Don't Breathe is exactly the same as this movie, where you got a group of people that are going to break into a house of a blind guy to steal stuff for their own financial gain. And then they discover, like, oh, hell, we should have never went in here because now we're being hunted. And Stephen Lang, the guy from Avatar and Tombstone and things like that, he ends up being blind, but he ends up hunting them and kind of killing them one by one, which is exactly what this movie is. So it's kind of the same setup where it's like, got teens or, young adults, and they're going to break into this place, try to steal some stuff, and they end up breaking into the wrong place and being killed one by one by one by one.
Right.
And also, Stephen Lang in a turkey baster tries to impregnate a woman, which you would have to watch it to really understand it, Jay. But
that sounds like something out of Seed of Chucky and that I never wanted to rethink about, but thanks a lot.
Yes.
So, now I will never watch Don't Breathe. Thank you.
Yes, it's hog tying, turkey baster. Yes.
Say no more, please. So, but speaking of pregnant ladies, let's go back to Kay here, who is bleeding profusely, and they want to, like, Tyler's like, inject her with the goo. Andy being controlled by mother's like, inject her with the goo, yeah. And of course, Rain's like, you don't know what that shit's going to do. Like, but ultimately,
she's got common sense.
But let's
not do this.
But 5 minutes later, she's like, here, take this, stick yourself with it. I'll throw you in the cryotube. It'll be all good. And the woman's like, sure, fuck it, why not? And she sticks herself with it. And I'm like, okay, now I know that's gonna end badly. But Nick. All I had heard.
I don't even like to take Tylenol if I know I'm going to have a beer at night, Jay.
Okay.
Like, this is crazy to me.
Okay, so let's just go with this for a minute. Okay? Because I had heard these words about the third act. Like, berserk, out of this world, sickening, bizarre. And I thought, okay, the third act of this movie is going to go bonkers. And I'm like, well, we're not there yet, so it's going to be the quick third act. I'm like, okay, it's got to be something to do with this. And I was not prepared for what we got. Now, I want to take everybody back, if you haven't listened to it, and I recommend go listen to our reviews of Prometheus and Alien Covenant. It's not us just shitting on the movie for 3 hours, I promise. We give it its due when it needs
Only
it.
2 hours.
But the Numi Rapace C-section scene in that was one that I had a very visceral reaction to, still do to this day. It's one of the most disturbing things I've ever seen in a movie. Until today, when Kay pops back out of her cryo tube because Brain opens it up. This is after we've already taken one shower. We're all getting ready to go to bed. And she births like a seed pod. And the only thing we don't get is the knocked up, straight up view into it, man.
Does that, though, like, not to cut you off, but remember in Aliens how they wanted to impregnate Ripley and Newt and then put them in cryo sleep for the journey and keep them impregnated?
Yeah, didn't that defeat that? Like, it wouldn't work.
Because obviously now she got, I mean, maybe it wasn't completely done, the process of putting her in there, but I was like,
well, the difference is if you put a facehugger seed in somebody and they go to sleep, then presumably the facehugger, the alien inside, is sleeping too. And then when they get them out, they take them out. I don't know. I'm just trying to explain Alien 3 for a minute. This one is she's injected herself with the Promethean goo, the black goo, and it has merged with her fetus, which is she's only like a couple.
Is there
of months
anything
pregnant.
that black goo just can't do?
Dude, we're gonna get to the magic black goo in a little while, but this is merged with her like 2-month-old fetus because she's not showing as pregnant at this point.
No, she's definitely first trimester.
Yeah, she's still puking and throwing up. You know, so she's early on. She's not showing. It has merged with her, so she's got the full belly. She shoots out the invasion of the body snatcher seed pod. And
you're going pretty easy on this, man. They show her stomach. It went from flat to bowling ball. Yeah, basketball.
Yeah.
You know, she's screaming. Her legs are open, squirting blood out and everything.
Yeah,
and then all of a sudden she pushes out exactly where it would come from.
Yep.
A giant egg, and basically, like, she's freaking out. Rain grabs this egg, and I thought she was going to chuck it at first because that would have been funny. But she runs away with it because she's like, "What the hell is this thing?" And then it starts burning her because it's like filled with acid. And then you see it open up in a very, you know, genital type way, and you see like a human face, and it's like, what the hell? Kind of almost like The Fly 2, if you've ever seen that.
It's very Fly 2. It's very 2001 Space Baby.
And then the egg ends up like burning a hole through it and then goes down there and then...
to the cargo hold.
Yeah.
The Thunderbird 2 cargo hold for those that followed that show back in the day.
Yep. And then she goes down there to try to find it. In the meantime, this thing comes out and it grows really, really quick. And we have like essentially a callback to Alien Resurrection, in my opinion, where we have the newborn, which is, you know, played by this basketball player. This guy is like, what, like
7 feet tall.
Yeah, like 7'6". And
I mean, it's to try to describe this, folks, the newborn was this grotesque half alien, but very brown. This is very much humanoid, but
I took an engineer from Prometheus.
Yeah, it had an engineer's face.
Yes.
Yeah, it was very much
and it had like an alien tail, and it was naked, but no genitals.
Kind of like Splice a little bit going on there.
Very Splice.
Yeah, but very tall Splice, but also like Pumpkinheadish.
And then it had the tongue from frickin' Blade 2, the vampires from Blade 2.
Yes, but also that was like part of the Prometheus. Like, remember the vagina snake that we made fun of?
Oh, the penis vagina snake?
Yes, it's very much that is going on there. Well, it's like an urchin.
Listen,
you know.
I'm just going to go out there and say I appreciate that every movie has brought something new to the mythos. Like, Alien was the one that started it off with what it is. Aliens introduced the Queen.
Right.
Alien 3 introduced, you know, the genetic DNA copying that the alien will do, you know, probably for its own survival. Yeah, the host, it'll take on attributes from it. It took attributes of a dog or an ox, depending on which version you watch.
Yeah.
And then, you know, Alien 4 brought in the newborn and the whole cloning technology, and then so forth. The Prometheus Covenant, I don't even want to get into it, but you know, I appreciate it when they bring in new elements there because you got to keep it interesting. You got to change up a little bit here and add some stuff to it. But for me, I prefer the frickin' newborn from Alien Resurrection. I'm going to say it right now because at least that had personality, I guess you could say. Like, it was actually like, you know, a character in a way. This just seemed like it was just, you know, weird CGI monster with his tongue coming out and they set it up in the beginning of the movie like they're walking around the Remus space station. They see some artwork of, you know, the Romulus Remus story and like a baby like, you know, breastfeeding on its dead mother and stuff, and then this thing comes over to, you know, its mom, the woman that birthed its egg, and like used its tongue and like sucked the blood out of her or something.
Yeah, it looks like, it was very, like,
I don't even know what he did to her.
I asked you, I was like, was that thing doing what I think it was doing? I feel like there's a lot of this movie that's cut, and somewhere on the Hulu version, I guess we'll get to see all this if you want it. But you were like, yeah, that's Chekhov's teeth. And I was like, okay, fair. That's exactly what that was. I'd forgotten that scene, and then I said, oh yeah, they did flash through that artwork. And you don't point a camera on something for no reason in the first act. So
yeah,
that was coming back. Nick, I was not prepared that this was how this was going to go, and I got to tell you, I fucking hated it. I really, really hated it because it was very Pumpkinhead. It was very Eddie from Judas Priest. It was Alien Resurrection, Newborn.
It just wasn't
hybrid.
Well.
It wasn't
well done.
It wasn't well done. It didn't look good either, and it also was the wrong idea. I would have been fine. You would have been. You want to have some cool here? Like, I get the idea. It's like it's got to take on some sort of deal. She's a mother, right? Or expectant mother. Why doesn't she birth the fucking queen, the first queen we ever see?
Yeah,
wouldn't that have worked?
Something. I mean, for me, I know that all these Alien movies have a fourth act, right?
Yes,
and that's what this is. Alien had the one where it snuck on the ship. Aliens again snuck on the ship. Alien 3 was. I guess that one really didn't have a
no,
fourth
it didn't
act,
have one.
really.
Well, that movie, I mean, it's so well documented how compromised it was to even get made to what got made, and then it was totally taken out of the director's hands at the end. So who knows what was even going on in that one?
And Alien 4 had the fourth act.
It did, which was a compromise itself, but yeah.
And then I think Alien Covenant kind of had the fourth act as well. But with this creature just felt like it was out of a video game.
It was, And the whole ending is a video game. She's got to go pull 4 levers to drop the cargo.
Yeah, I think that was in Resident Evil Code Veronica. We had to do the same thing in that game where you had to pull a lever and drop the thing.
It felt like a siphon filter game. All of these games. It was a game. It was a video game at the end. And I have no problem sometimes that some of these movies turn into video games, but give me the damn controller. I don't want to watch it. I'm not of the generation that watches Twitch. That's cool. I like Dark Viper AU too, but mostly because he's funny, not because I like watching him play GTA 5. I want to play the game if I'm going to do that. I want to watch somebody do it. It looked bad. I got to say too, for a movie that looked so good, man, this looked so bad. It looked cheap.
Well, and then of course we get the Alien. This was probably the homage, not lines, get away from her, you bitch, but a plot homage that I felt was just it's just too much. Where, she's running away from it and the whole spaceship's filling up. Because at this time, Andy's disabled as well.
Yes.
He got knocked down like Bishop did at the end of Aliens. And she's running around. There's some type of chemical in the air that's making it that she can't breathe. I think the cryo sleep.
The cryo started, she's freezing to death, so she has to put on the suit, aka Ripley, but not in the same idea.
But it's the same thing. She's putting on the suit, and then suddenly it's oh, well, I'm going to drop this cargo thing. I'm going to tether myself to the main ship and then drop it. And it's so poorly directed at the end. I had no idea what was going on. The acid goes down. She ends up grabbing the egg that it was birthed out of and pours the acid, which I'm okay, of course. Most of 3 of the 4 Alien movies, it's defeated by getting sucked out of, I think even Alien Covenant was too. Getting sucked out into outer space. So we're going to do that again. And I don't even know what happened. It looked like it was also being absorbed by the rings on the planet.
It was being chewed up by the rocks at the same time.
Yeah, and then it's breaking her helmet with the
tongue.
Yeah.
Which is now evolved into jaws of somehow.
Yeah.
And, it's very... And also I got this flashback to 30 Days of Night, if you've ever seen that. These zombie vampire situations going on. It's very much in that vein. It's just... There's too much going on at that. I'm I know you wanted to have a stinger climax because these movies, like you say, will do that. But there was an easier way to make that work, and it would have looked much cooler. This is just bad, and it really sucks too because up to this point, even for all the nitpicks, I'm having a pretty good time.
Yeah,
I'm enjoying this, and when she pulls away, when the ship realizes oh, the cargo's gone, I guess I'll turn on autopilot again.
Yeah, which I still don't even understand. I
don't know either. I'm not going to ask because I'm whatever at this point. And
at that point, why not just have Andy be able to get up and go and take control of the spaceship like Bishop did and Aliens and
something,
pull away and save the day or something? It just it's poorly directed.
I think the reason they did that, they wanted Rain to do all of these things, which is fine. I mean, she's very capable, character obviously, but it was just a bridge too far. And I'm not throwing that on her or Kelly Spaney because she's acting her ass off with what she's given. this is some stupid shit that you're trying to get through at the end of this because you had to have one more jump, you know. It's like we blow the shark up and then half of it comes back or it's on fire or something.
Yeah, it's
just dumb, and it's almost as bad as the Jaws 4 shark like dancing on the fucking water while Lorraine Gary's steering his ship toward it. It's almost that bad. It's not that bad, but that shark may look better. Honestly, this effect is bad for a movie where the effects look great. This effect is terrible. I'm just going to harp on that. This effect is garbage.
It's if you've ever seen that Will Smith movie.
I Am Legend.
Yes. It looks just like the vampires in there.
Thank you. Yes.
But we get through that. She kills it. She ends up getting back on the ship and puts Andy into cryo sleep, which I guess an android has to go into there for some reason.
She's basically shutting him down so that she can repair him when he gets there. But she takes out like his chip so they won't know he's Weyland-Yutani or something.
I guess that makes sense.
Because where they're going, like there's no Weyland-Yutani allowed or something. Like we don't serve their kind here. There's some of that shit in this movie too, which is also it's played by obviously a black actor. If that's commentary, it's shittily done in this movie. I don't think they should have gone with that, but whatever. So they do that, and she's like, "I'll fix you," you know, and she does the Ripley thing where like we got to record a voice recording. You know, I'm the last survivor signing off. I'm like, to never be heard from again.
I hated the signing off thing.
They did
not. And it's not even the fact that it's like, oh, I'm signing off. It's almost verbatim. The exact same thing that Ripley does. And I guess you could sit there and say, well, that's just what they always do in outer space. You know, like saying 10-4 over a radio. But, you know, she's like, what was the ship that she was on called? That was
the Corbellion.
Yeah, last survivor of the Corbellion. It's like, am I supposed to act like she's like actually like a crew member on there? Jay, that would be like me and you going on like a road trip and then like you dying and then like I'm sitting there like, Nick, you know, last survivor of Jay's Honda CRV. You know what I mean? It's
exactly,
she's acting like their ship was like some like
she was her ship.
Like she was on the USS Enterprise or something like that. Like no, it's like a fucking car. Like it hopped you from the planet up in there and the thing crashed through there. It was so stupid.
It is dumb, but it's also a way to, okay, how do we explain how we've never heard of these people again? They go off to their planet of wonderment, you know, Never Land. They go sailing with Christopher Cross out into that, and we never hear from them again because there's nowhere to pick up from this, you know, because again, this Homage Fest has finally run its course and gotten to the point that it's overdone its welcome and it's jumped its own shark, and that's where we are, you know. So we're at the part of the podcast where it's time to give final thoughts, recommendations, and popcorn ratings, though, Nick. So, what are yours for Alien Romulus?
It sucks. I'm not saying the movie sucks. I'm saying it sucks that I have to come down hard on this movie. I was really looking forward to this. I thought everything I heard, what everybody was saying was this is a return to form. Yeah, it homages, but at the same time, it's respecting and then taking the best of what came in the past. But to me, it feels like a lot of it's just kind of pointless ripoffs. And we were kind of, you know, before we could record this, we were talking about Star Wars. Mm-hmm. You know, that always seems to come up. And how I said the prequels seem better in comparison to where the sequels, because of where the sequels went.
Yep.
The prequels are shitty movies. But in comparison to the series, now they don't look so bad. And that's kind of my review here, is that I was coming in here hoping that at the best I would get, you know, the third best Alien movie. Mm-hmm. I thought, man, it'd be awesome if I could, you know, this would be the trilogy where you got one Romulus and aliens, and I can just ignore everything else. That's my headcanon. That's the stuff I want. To tell you the truth, this one makes Alien 3 look a lot better. It does. I think back to Alien 3 and I'm like, the score, the cinematography in there, the characters, even the freaking Cockney guys that all look alike. I'm like, I was at least invested in that story. And it felt like a real movie. This one does not always feel like it's that level. So for me, it's a medium popcorn. It's probably mid in the series as far as what I like. I'm going to say right now that, you know, Alien and Aliens is kind of a tie for me. Like those are like 1A, 1B for the movie.
Yeah.
And then it's pretty much going to go Alien 3 is my third favorite. And I'm struggling right now if I rank this one or Resurrection as the fourth. And if I had to pick, if you had to put a gun to my head and go, you had to pick one, I'd take Resurrection over this at this point. Just because of the level of fun that movie does have, even though it's stupid. and everything. But you got Brad Dourif in there chewing up the scenery. You got real actors in there really kind of having a good time. And this one just kind of feels like a wannabe. And it's disappointing because, again, I think that it had some promise. It had some good scenes. But the Ian Holm CGI mess was unbearably distracting. The ending of the movie with that CGI, mess of whatever that is was just terrible. And then just the exposition drops and everything were just so done poorly. I even go back to like Alien Resurrection, where you watch like the director's cut where they talk about, whatever happened to Weyland-Yutani? And they go, it was bought out by Walmart. Funny little exposition line or whatever.
Yeah. None
of those first 4 movies had just knock you over the head exposition on stuff. It was organically intertwined through. But I digress. It's a medium popcorn. It is the fifth best or 4th worst, whatever you want to phrase it, in the series. It's right in the middle. And with that, I'm disappointed because I wish in the end it either would have been a complete abortion that would have been fun to kind of make fun of, or really good where it would be like, hey, I can raise this up and tell you it's like, the trilogy that I've always wanted. And at the end, it's just milquetoast.
There's a fine line between homage and just being a cover of something. Like you can pay homage to things, and horror movies and sci-fi action movies are notorious for this. It's just rife through the genre. And the genre's really built for it too. And I'm okay with some of that. But there comes a line when now you're not being original in anything. And that's what frustrates me so most about this movie, Nick, is that there's some stuff in here that I'm like, oh, that's cool. This evolution in the way the alien, the xenomorph, becomes itself, from going from the chest burster to that adult. We've never seen that second cocooning thing. Like, we knew they built cocoons all the time, but now it explains like why that physiology works the way it does, why those walls are built that way. It's basically their leftover shell to where they become the big, scary ones. I loved that. I thought it was cool. I thought, again, David Johnson does a hell of a job in this movie as the android Andy. He's great. And everybody else is fine too. Kaylee Spaney's fine. The rest of them are forgettable, but they know they are. They're dead meat. They're in a horror movie. All of that I could forgive. Even for all the dips in the homages, even the bad line reading that I didn't need near the end of it. If it wasn't for this very end, that just sunk this in a way that I went in with I just want this to be fun and watchable. Covenant was dumb, but I felt like it was fun and watchable. But in rewatch, it's kind of like, it's kind of a one-shot deal and you're through with it. It's a pop song. This, I was like, okay, I can see myself watching this again. I can see myself watching this again. I'm going to pick up on things the next time. I'm going to catch this Easter egg. We get all this. Maybe they should call this movie Alien Easter Eggs, ultimately, because it feels like it's what it is. But when it came to that end, man, it just sinks it for me, dude. It really does. And it pisses me off because I was like, oh, you had it. It's like the fucking Falcons blowing that lead in the Super Bowl years ago. It's just like, oh, you're right there. And then you just crapped out. You just can't get it. Or it's an album back when bands made full albums and you're like, the first 6 songs are great. And then the last 4 are just garbage. They just fall apart. I feel the same way about Alien Romulus, is that there's some great ideas. It looks incredible up until the very end, the CGI we've complained about. I think Fede Alvarez had the right sensibilities for it in a lot of ways. Let's get gory. Let's get weird. Cool. But again, it's just the way that ended. It was like, oh, we didn't need to do that. And if we were going to do that, it didn't need to resolve that way. It just feels so perfunctory. And that frustrates me for a movie that doesn't waste a lot of time. It's like it had the most hurried ending ever. It's like a bad finish on a wrestling main event. It's like everything's good up until the end. It's like, oh, that can sink it. It really can. And it sinks this one. I'm going to give it a medium popcorn. It's a reluctant medium though, and it's mostly because the first 3/4 of it are so good and are good enough and enough to get by on that I'm like, it's worth watching that. But man, when that hybrid thing shows up at the end. And I don't like Alien Resurrection. That's well documented on the pod. I even in rewatch, I still think that movie's just bad. It's just badly wrong-headed in a lot of ways. But that hybrid thing at the end is at least freaky and scary. Like this is just gross and dumb. And I think at that point it just turned me off. So it sinks it. I'm going to give it a medium, and it kills me too because I know they've got Alien Earth is supposed to be coming out next. Is the next FX show, and I'm like, I don't even know what that's going to be now. Like, what are we doing with that? That's supposedly the trailer for that, the teaser for that's on the front of some of these. I saw that online today, and it's just like an Earth, and then the head creams up, and it's the alien face. And I'm like, well, I saw that in the Alien 3 promo too. We didn't ever do that, so who knows what that'll be. But I know they're going to do more from this franchise. Where do you want it to go? Where can it go? What do you want them to do with this? Because it's a property that obviously is going to be milked.
Where it could go in the future. How about just go into the future? Like, none of this, like, prequels, side quills, mid quills. Like, let's just go in the future. You know what I mean? You don't have to include Ripley, obviously. Sigourney Weaver's, pretty, she's getting up there, as we all do. And just go in the future. It's kind of like what I said about Star Wars, is like, stop just playing around in this, like, 60-year period and, like, go out in the future. Prequels and midquels are always going to have that element where you know where it's going to end because there's nothing that can really change, because you know where the story is going to go after. When you talk about like prequels, like even like, House of the Dragon, it's like at the end of you know where the story is going to go eventually. So it takes away a lot of the suspense, I feel.
Right.
So it's like, just go into the future, do something different, and just try it like that. I think that there's definitely is some legs on the series. I'm looking forward to the TV show that's going out because I do like the creator of it. Fargo is one of my favorite shows on TV. Yeah. So he did a very good job with Legion as well. Very underrated on, a show that a lot of people didn't watch. But for movie wise, I'd like to see in the future. The one thing I do not want to see, and that's my fear, that's what they're talking about right now, is having the director of Prey and then this director make an Alien versus Predator movie. No, we don't. And don't get me wrong, I love the first Predator movie. It's an all-time classic.
Prey's pretty good too.
But Prey's good, but Alien is definitely like, Alien's more of a piece of art, especially with the first two movies, where Predator is a ripoff of Aliens, a large part of it, and it's just not in the same class. It's not in the same level. I think it's not as good, and I don't want to see those. Keep it to video games and comic books, but keep it out of the movie theaters as far as them going together. You tried it twice, they both sucked, and it just doesn't work. It's stupid. Predator got beat by Danny freaking Glover. Okay?
So what you're saying is Alien is Mozart and Bach, and Predator is Judas Priest. They're classical musicians, but they're playing trashy heavy metal.
I would say that
Iron Maiden, that too. I think I've talked about Judas Priest a lot, and I've also meant Iron Maiden in a lot of this stuff tonight too, with the Eddie character. But either way,
I would say Alien is ballroom dancing, and Predator is Olympic breakdancing.
I don't know. That maybe Predator, maybe the Predator or Predators is ballroom dancing, or the.
Have you seen Predators?
Yes.
Or no Predators, or The Predator?
Actually, I kind of liked The Predator. I thought it was kind of fun. It's dumb, but it's fun.
Oh my God, it's so strange.
It's fun, but either way, I'm with you. I have hope that this TV thing can be good, but I don't know, man. Like, even as much money as you can use on it, I don't know how good it can be. There's only so much it can do. I'm for one, Nick, at this point, I'm with you. We need to tell stories that aren't centered around this very small circle of people that we just are obsessed with. Let's just let's put this alien in a different place and see what happens with it, and stop trying to tell its damn origin story. I don't need to know anymore. I really don't. I don't want to know. Like, the more they unravel that, the worse it gets. And I think that is true across the board. I can't think of one single origin story that didn't completely undermine what the initial telling of the monster
I can name one.
What's that?
Better Call Saul.
Okay, see, I have never seen it because I refuse to do that because I just love Breaking Bad too much.
But it adds so much to that character in that show. But that is the only time I've ever felt like an origin of a character, a creature, a series, TV, or movie actually worked. Because so much time, you are right, it weakens it.
Well, when you explain the killer's motive too much, when you explain the monster's motive too much, it tears away from the threat of it. If you tell us too much about Jason, Freddy, or Michael Myers, or Chucky, or the paranormal activity ghosts, or whatever you want to call it, or Jigsaw, it just undermines the whole thing. Like, eventually you start rooting for the killer, which is the wrong motif anyway.
The thing is, Ridley Scott started this with Prometheus, and I think a lot of it had to do with the death of his brother.
Oh, I totally did.
I think that
he wanted to make a movie about trying to find God and the afterlife and all that, and then the only way they'd give you money for it is if you made it, connect to Alien in some way. That's just known at this point.
Yeah, and then he ripped off a lot of like In the Mountains of Madness with Prometheus.
Yes,
and he's just he went and did the HBO series like Raised by Wolves, which felt like a lot like it was in the Alien series, but the whole like talking about the God, these aliens being gods and creators being creators. And, I'm just like, enough. Like, I just want to go back to the crazy, just disgusting nature of the movies and just stick with that as opposed to like trying to answer questions that no one has really asked in these movies. Like, you want to sit there and talk about God or whatever, that Raised by Wolves, great place to go do that with. But it's like Aliens, I don't like that plot thread in these movies. I don't like the over explanation of the aliens. It's so now it's muddled and confusing. Some people think David created the aliens, but then it's like, well, this movie kind of says like, well, they got the, maybe I don't know.
They got the goo, but they got part of this technology. It was a bioweapon.
Yeah,
but
Nomi Rapace gets the black goo in her, and she's birthing a big giant trilobite, and this one does it, and it's an 8-foot tall basketball player. I mean, it's just it's all over the place with this stuff, and I wish they would have just kept it more simple. I thought that the natural progression from Alien to Aliens was perfect. And I wish that they would have just kind of kept with that. And
even what they did with Alien 3 was a good progression into the idea. If you wanted to kill it and end it off, if that was the idea. But like with any franchise, they're just going to keep doing it. I'm with you, though. We agree. Let's not unravel the mystery of these xenomorphs anymore. Let's just put them in a place and let all hell break loose. Because that's when it's more fun. Again, when this movie is in its most fun is when these people don't know what they're dealing with and they're just having to react to it. And that's what the first movie was. And a lot of ways, the second one, too. They had no idea what they were dealing with. And that's what makes it fun. And, I'll give this movie credit. It's got a good cast. I mean, these people, we talk about they're forgettable in name because, they're just set up to be body count. But they're fun. They don't fit the typical archetype of, like, all the pretty people that are in the movie. They look like kind of people that would work in a mine. They're all kind of a little famished and a little thin. They look a little rough around the edges. I was okay with that. But I don't want any more backstory on the xenomorph or anything like that. And I do not want it to do a WWE match against another creature from another franchise. We don't need that anymore because I don't think that's ever worked. Even Godzilla and Kong, it didn't really work that well. So I don't want to do that anymore either. But
it can work. I mean, you can bring it back to its roots. You look at Godzilla -1. That was a movie that came out. Yeah, very much a movie that was like we went back to the roots of the first one, making it horrific, making it this unstoppable force.
Well, it made it about the characters, too. It's about those people and their trauma they were dealing with. Yeah.
Yep, and that's the great thing about that movie, and that's why it works. And it's like you could very much do that with this series. You don't necessarily just have to keep diluting it and adding more and more to it. It's just stick to what the basis of what the originals were and just stick with it. And just, you could tell new stories and add new elements into it. But when you start doing all this,
you pick up the threads too much. Yeah. It just unravels, and that's the problem with it. So, well, we've spent a good bit of time talking about Alien Romulus. We thank everybody for joining in, listening to this. Of course, you can follow the show on social media at FilmStripPod, where we share announcements about upcoming shows. You find us on wherever you find your podcasts, all kinds of episodes out there. This will be episode number 388, Nick, which means we are barreling toward number 400, which will come out the 1st of 2025, the very first of the year. And we held a little poll internally first among all the Film Strip hosts, past and present, that are still podcasting out there with us. And we came up with a list of movies. We narrowed it down to 3. We threw it out there for the people. And the people have spoken, Nick. For number 400, we've name dropped it a lot.
We've hinted at it quite a bit in here.
Yeah, we're talking about Jurassic Park, which in 14 years of podcasting, we've never done that movie. It's amazing. Or any of them.
Nature finds a way, right?
I guess it does. So, hopefully it's not a situation where we don't spend too much time asking if we should, and we're too busy worrying if we could. But we're going to get to 400. We will do Jurassic Park. But we've got a few more episodes before we get there. And of course, you can always find those on YouTube, Amazon, Spotify, Apple. Those are the big ones. If there's a place to leave us a review, please do. Bonus points if you leave a positive review and share the show on your socials, because it helps other people find the podcast. We've been doing this a long time, and we've done it so long at this point that it's just pretty much for fun. At this point, it's good to get together and chat and talk movies And all the Alien movies are in the back catalog. You can go and search for them. You can hear Nick and I talk about all these. Some of the earliest.
We did those back when I was in my 20s, Jay.
Yes. You weren't even living in the Carolinas at that point when we did this episode.
Yeah, I was in my 20s. I'm 40 now.
yeah. So we've been doing this a while. So it's all those are there, of course, with a lot of other things in the back catalog as well. We appreciate it when you go back and listen. It's always fun to me to go back and look and see just these random reports, from Anchor and Spotify of like these episodes that we've had for 10 years in there, and people are just starting to listen to them all of a sudden. I'm like, this is so much fun, to think about. And I cringe to think, God, what did I say back then? Because I'm a very different person than I was when we started the show. But either way, a lot of stuff there for you to listen to. And of course, some real fun. And I was supposed to tell it now since we've already told what 400 is. It's going to be a big show, man. It's going to be me, you, Brian, Kurt, Ron, Irina, Lindsay, and Nate are all going to be on the same show at once. And
bringing the crew back together.
We're pretty much bringing the whole band together. It's like a rock and roll Hall of Fame.
It's like a Fast and Furious sequel.
It kind of is. It is. It takes something special.
You thought Ron died in a car wreck, but it turned out it wasn't him. So he's back.
Ron's been around a long time, but we were having a good time with this. And that'll be a fun review. But before we get there, a lot more fun stuff to come up. I mean, gosh, we haven't even got to Shocktober yet, man. We've got some real fun stuff coming up for that, and a lot of fun guests to be a part of that as well. Of course, again, folks, you can always find that in the feed wherever you find the show. Give us a listen. We appreciate the support. So until next time, for Nick, I'm Jay. Thank you for listening to Film Strip.
Thank you for listening to Film Strip. You can find more episodes on our website, filmstrippodcast.com. The Film Strip theme music is produced and performed by Frozen Lake 121. All content used or discussed in these podcast episodes is the property of the respective owners and used under the Fair Use Act, Section 504, C2, Title 17.